Alright, you finally joined your new and first tabletop RPG. You're playing D&D 5e, and this is your first time ever. You created your character, you figured out their plot background, you have an understanding of the setting. You're pretty much ready to go for any newbie player. But your GM comes to you and says, hey, I want to have a session 0 with you and the rest of the players since this is my first time GMing this game, and also this is y'all first time playing. And you're thinking to yourself, what is a session 0? And you're also wondering, your GM mentioned safety tools before. What the heck are safety tools? Well, today viewers, we're going to be talking about what are safety tools and why they're important for your next tabletop RPG. So, what are safety tools? The simplest answer is that safety tools are ways for players and the GM to communicate more effectively about the game they are playing. It might include check-ins to make sure everyone's having fun and that no one feels left out of the game. It also might include making sure that everyone feels comfortable at the table, virtually or otherwise. So, that means bringing in tools to make it so that no one feels left out, uncomfortable, or hurt when playing a fictional world socially. The key to a good game, I think, is in a session 0 and in some well-used safety tools for when the game gets a little bit too intense. Because at the end of the day, everyone wants to have a safe and fun and enjoyable time playing their favorite tabletop RPG, whether that's D&D 5e, Pathfinder, or whatever have you. Essentially, the key to an effective safety tool is built on communication and trust between all of the players and GM in mind. Because, like I said before, folks' well-being and having a fun time is greater than the game or story. And the final point is, there is no one specific safety tool. There's a number of different things you can use before your game, during your game, and after your game to make sure that all players are having fun, as well as making sure that no one feels left out or hurt or even upset when they finish their game. And I'm sure there's going to be a contingent of folks who might sound like this. I don't need no safety tools in my darn game. We don't have these silly little trigger warnings or line thingies or anything like it. We play our games raw and easily. We don't worry about any of that stuff. And for you, my fellow viewer, if you found this content, firstly, this video is not for you, and secondly, that is some bull crap. Everyone wants to feel safe and comfortable at their tabletop RPG. No one wants to feel ostracized, no one wants to feel hurt, and no one wants to deal with really uncomfortable topics that they didn't sign up for. And your game is no exception. Everyone does it, whether it be subconsciously or actively. And in this case, safety tools allow you to present this information upfront to your players before you even begin the game so that you don't have an awkward conversation about, say, a triggering topic such as, well, assault or violence or abuse of animals for that matter. Safety tools are useful for that, and if, say, this happens during your game, you don't have to have that awkward conversation, and no one likes awkward conversations. Now, I get it. Some people might not ever have a session 0 or use safety tools because you're playing with friends you've known for years. That happens, and that is an exception to the rule. But if you're playing in an online game or in a public space where you don't know everyone, safety tools and session 0s and all those things can be super useful. So, to start, we're going to be talking about safety tools that you can use before your game. One safety tool that I think is paramount to any and every game is a session 0. It allows you to get to know each other, set expectations on the game, and introduce the tools that you'll be using during the game. A session 0 allows you to also learn about the players you're playing with, and if it's a new group of people, it helps to understand their personalities, what they like and don't like, as well as what's going to work for you at the table, especially if this is a multi-form or longer session campaign. Let's say you're not running a one-shot. It helps a great deal to know that you have synergy as a player or a GM with the people you're playing with. Also, a session 0 is great for new players to understand the system. Let's say you are a player who's been playing D&D 5e for years, but you want to get into, say, Traveler 2e. Yeah, it might help to have a GM and players who are familiar with this game. Just throwing yourself in there is a good idea, but a better idea is to have a session 0 and understand the mechanics so that you as a player can effectively play the game. And finally, a session 0 can do a number of different things for new and old players. It can set the tone of the game. Maybe you don't want to play a politically charged game. you just want to play a sort of hack and slash tabletop RPG. It can also introduce the world, especially if it's homebrew, and for new players that's super helpful. Maybe it can help with character creation. For a lot of us, character creation is one of the most important times for players. So knowing what kind of characters you can play and create is super important. Also, it can help you build your world together, GMs. Yes, you might have crafted this perfectly awesome homebrew, but if you don't have player input, then you're not going to have a fun time because your players aren't invested. And finally, you can use your session 0 to explain your safety tools. In fact, the other safety tool that we can use before your game is Line and Veils. Lines and Veils is a good before session safety tool because you straight up just talk about what you do want in your game and you don't want. So, lines. They are the hard limits on content and topics that GMs and players will not engage. It means this content will not show up in your RPG. For instance, a GM does not want to depict enslavement in their game, or say bugs or creepy crawlies in their game. That is a hard limit, aka line. Veils, on the other hand, are soft limits, things that are going to fade to black or cut to black for these scenes. For instance, animal cruelty or scenes of torture might be ones that often go to black, because, well, who wants to describe that stuff in their game? Lines and veils allow you to talk explicitly about what you want in your game and you don't. Another safety tool is script change ratings. These are a bit more self-explanatory. They're used to set tones and boundaries. Essentially think of them as film ratings that are given to other media, but you apply it to your tabletop RPG. Maybe you are running an Aliens game, and a lot of that content is going to be R rated. So, for new players who are looking for this game, Aliens, they know exactly the kind of content and rating that they're going to get into when playing said game. It's useful especially for if you're advertising on Reddit, or maybe on Fantasy Grounds, or whatever have you. Finally is the Luxton technique. It's an open discussion on what trauma triggers or content you don't want in your game. It assumes that there's no social pressure into going into detail on justification for said triggers or content. It's simple as that. You talk about what you're feeling and you acknowledge that it won't be in the game. So during the game, the best tool I've used and seen is X, N, and O cards. These are check-in tools. They can be physical cards or implemented into tabletop RPG software like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or even Tabletop RPG Simulator. X card. It's where it points out if a participant is uncomfortable and folks can change, rewind, or skip said content. The N card. It's usually used to fade to black for particular scenes. And finally is the O card. It's used to say, let's keep going over content, or hey, let's keep going with the game. Next is the script change. Firstly, you have rewind. This is used by tapping the card and typing the shorthand in the chat or stating it out loud saying, hey, I'd like to rewind this topic a little bit and change this particular piece. Rewinds are useful if, say, you go over a topic and a player or GM is thinking, I don't really want to include this in our game and it's a bit unnerving. Let's rewind a bit and talk about this for a brief moment. Next is fast forward. This is used when participants are comfortable and want to skip past a scene into a new story piece. Afterwards is pause. It's when things are super intense, but you want to continue playing. Usually, this means a break. And most games generally have breaks to begin with, but it helps to have this option because sometimes you might need more breaks or maybe you need less breaks, depends on the players and GMs in mind. Finally is resume. It's when everyone is back from their break and ready to play. Kind of self-explanatory, right? And the next one is open door policy, which I do think you should implement with script change and or the X, N, and O cards, depending on the game. Open door is literally exactly what you hear. You as a GM and or player have an open door policy. Folks can take a break or leave the game without feeling judged, and they can leave whenever they want. This is super useful if, say, you're playing a tabletop RPG in person and the players are mentioning stuff that you're not comfortable with. An open door policy can also look like on Discord or say whatever app you might use to play your RPG, you say, hey, if something makes you really uncomfortable, you have all the right to leave and come to the next game or talk to GM afterwards about it. Now, of course, do try to be respectful to the team around you, especially if the GM put loads of work into it, but communicate that frustration with your GM and players, especially if it gets to that level. But what about after the game? Well, the first tool to use is Aftercare, and I'm sure some of y'all might have heard the term Aftercare in, well, different scenarios, but we're not talking about that one, gamers. We are talking about tabletop RPGs. So, for Aftercare, the best option is to check in with folks and see how they're feeling post-game. Help folks emotionally decompress and talk through what happened after the game. For example, maybe you came from fighting a big bad evil guy and everyone's very much feeling intense and scared and emotionally charged. It's your job as a GM or a player to help your friends feel comfortable and to decompress post the game situation. Next is debriefing. This is a more direct way to reflect on the game's content, mechanics, and even how people played. It identifies specific issues on the GM side or player side of things. It also can highlight the fun times that happened as well as what went terribly wrong, whether, let's say, you as a GM fudged dice too many times or player characters kept constantly forgetting about rules. Those can be things you can talk about during the debriefing section. Finally is the wrap-up session and/or highlight reel. This is kind of self-explanatory, gamers. You just talk about what happened to your game and you wrap up all of the missing links. Wrap-up session could mean, say, talking about how much fun you had playing tabletop RPGs. Whatever the case is, be sure to implement all of these tools or be selective and choose whatever works for you. Just make sure to let me know what tools you're using down below in the comment section.